Kalinda and Evelina grew up together in the small town of Portland, Oregon. Despite their different personalities, the sisters were extremely close and shared everything with each other. Evelina was the more outgoing and affectionate of the two, always seeking the spotlight and thriving on attention. In contrast, Kalinda was quieter and more reserved, often choosing to stay in the background. While Evelina basked in the admiration of others, Kalinda was content with a quieter existence. This dynamic defined their relationship, yet it never created a rift between them. They were inseparable, their bond forged by years of shared secrets and unwavering support. On February 23, 2018, Kalinda married Ryan, a longtime friend she had known since childhood. The wedding took place in Portland, and it was a significant event in their lives. Evelina, as Kalinda's maid of honor, played a central role in the ceremony, and she appeared genuinely happy for her sister. The wedding was a grand affair, attended by family and friends who had known the sisters for years. During the wedding, Evelina started to feel uncomfortable. For as long as she could remember, she had always been the center of attention. Her charm and vivacity naturally drew people to her, and she had grown accustomed to being in the spotlight. However, on this day, all eyes were on Kalinda. Evelina found herself relegated to the background, a position she was not used to and did not enjoy. As the day progressed, Evelina's feelings of unease grew. She watched as Kalinda received all the attention, and she couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. This was a new and unfamiliar emotion for Evelina, who had always been at ease in social situations. She had never envied her sister before, but now, as she stood in the shadows, a sense of resentment began to take root. It was subtle, barely noticeable at first, but it was there, simmering beneath the surface. Despite these feelings, Evelina maintained her outward composure. She continued to smile and congratulate Kalinda, playing the role of the supportive sister. But inside, she was grappling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she loved her sister deeply and wanted her to be happy. On the other hand, she was struggling with her own need for attention and validation. After the wedding, Evelina's discomfort did not subside. In fact, it only grew stronger. She found herself thinking more and more about the attention Kalinda was receiving. It wasn't just at the wedding. Kalinda was now married, starting a new chapter in her life, and this brought with it a new level of admiration and respect from those around them. Evelina, who had always been the more prominent of the two, now felt overshadowed. Evelina began to visit Kalinda and Ryan frequently in their new home in the Portland suburbs. She needed reassurance that she was still important, that she still mattered. However, each visit only deepened her feelings of jealousy. She saw how happy Kalinda was, how content she seemed in her new life, and this only exacerbated Evelina's sense of being left behind. Evelina's inner turmoil began to affect her behavior. She became more critical of Kalinda, often finding fault in things that had never bothered her before. Small annoyances that she would have previously overlooked now seemed magnified. Kalinda, unaware of the storm brewing within Evelina, continued to rely on her sister's support. She confided in Evelina about the joys and challenges of married life, believing that they were as close as ever. To Kalinda, Evelina was still her best friend and confidant, someone she could trust completely. But Evelina's growing resentment was creating a rift between them, one that Kalinda couldn't see. Evelina's jealousy was not just about Kalinda's happiness, it was also about her own sense of identity. For years, Evelina had defined herself by her ability to command attention and admiration. Now, with Kalinda in the spotlight, Evelina felt as though she had lost a part of herself. She began to question her own worth and struggled to find a new sense of purpose. The more she focused on Kalinda's success, the more she felt like a failure by comparison. It was consuming her, affecting every aspect of her life. She became increasingly distant from Kalinda, finding excuses to avoid spending time with her. When they did interact, Evelina's resentment often bubbled to the surface, leading to tense and uncomfortable moments between the sisters. Several months after Kalinda and Ryan's wedding, Evelina began an affair with Ryan. Evelina, who had always been confident in her allure and charm, found herself drawn to Ryan in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her feelings of jealousy and inadequacy that had surfaced during Kalinda's wedding had now transformed into something more dangerous, a desire to reclaim the attention and validation she felt she had lost. Evelina's attraction to Ryan wasn't merely physical. It was rooted in her need to feel important and desired once again. Ryan, a well-known and respected businessman in Portland, held a powerful position as the CEO of a large company. He was not only successful but also well-connected, with a vast network of business partners and influential contacts. His status in the community made him a highly sought-after figure, both professionally and socially. Evelina knew that by winning his affections, she would regain the sense of importance that she had lost after Kalinda's marriage. Ryan, despite his outwardly perfect life, was not immune to Evelina's advances. The pressure of maintaining his public image and the demands of his career had left him feeling isolated and vulnerable. Evelina's boldness and confidence appealed to him in ways that Kalinda's more reserved nature did not. Evelina was everything that Kalinda wasn't: outgoing, adventurous, and unapologetically ambitious. Ryan found himself increasingly drawn to her, and the two quickly became entangled in a secretive affair. The affair provided Evelina with the attention she craved. She reveled in the secrecy, the thrill of the forbidden relationship, and the power she held over Ryan. For the first time in months, Evelina felt like she was back in control, back at the center of attention where she believed she belonged. The fact that she was deceiving her sister only added to the exhilaration, though she was careful to keep the affair hidden from Kalinda. Evelina knew that if Kalinda ever found out, it would destroy their relationship and likely ruin Ryan's career. As a public figure with a reputation to maintain, he knew that any hint of scandal could have devastating consequences. Additionally, as a member of the city council, Ryan's public and private lives were constantly under scrutiny. An affair with Evelina, if discovered, could not only damage his marriage, but also irreparably harm his professional standing. Despite the risks, Ryan continued the affair, unable to resist Evelina's charms. He found in Evelina an escape from the pressures of his life, a way to experience the excitement and passion that had been missing in his marriage. Evelina, in turn, manipulated Ryan's vulnerability to her advantage, ensuring that he remained under her influence. Evelina began to envision a future with Ryan, one where she could fully reclaim the spotlight and live the life she believed she deserved. However, she was acutely aware that this future was contingent on keeping the affair hidden. Kalinda could never know the truth, as it would not only shatter her sister's life, but also bring about the downfall of Ryan, the man Evelina now desired more than anything. The secrecy of the affair took a toll on both Evelina and Ryan. Evelina, though outwardly confident and composed, was constantly on edge, fearing that their secret would be discovered. She meticulously planned their meetings, ensuring that they were always discreet and that there were no traces of their relationship. Evelina's obsession with control and her need to protect the affair became all-consuming, affecting every aspect of her life. Ryan, too, was living a double life. At work, he maintained his image as a successful and respected businessman, while at home, he continued to play the role of a devoted husband to Kalinda. But beneath the surface, the affair was taking its toll on him. The constant fear of exposure, the guilt over betraying Kalinda, and the pressure to maintain his public image began to wear on Ryan. He found himself increasingly conflicted, torn between his feelings for Evelina and his responsibilities to his wife and career. Kalinda, who had long been unaware of the affair between her husband Ryan and her sister Evelina, stumbled upon the truth in the most unexpected and heartbreaking way. That day, she happened to be in downtown Portland and decided to visit a popular cafe during her lunch break. As Kalinda entered the cafe, she immediately noticed Ryan and Evelina sitting together at a secluded table. Their behavior was intimate, far beyond the boundaries of a normal friendship or family relationship. The way they looked at each other, the subtle touches, and the whispered conversation were all telltale signs that something was terribly wrong. Kalinda's heart sank as the realization dawned on her. Her husband and her sister were having an affair. The shock of the discovery was overwhelming. Kalinda felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she had just seen, but the pain and betrayal were too much to process. She watched them for a few moments, frozen in place, before turning and leaving the cafe in a daze. The betrayal cut deep, and she knew she had to confront Ryan, but the thought of facing the truth filled her with dread. Later that evening, Kalinda confronted Ryan at their home. Her voice trembled as she demanded an explanation. Ryan, caught off guard by Kalinda's knowledge of the affair, initially tried to deny it, but Kalinda's accusations were backed by what she had seen. Faced with the truth, Ryan finally confessed. He admitted to the affair, but what shocked Kalinda even more was his declaration of love for Evelina. Ryan coldly told her that he wanted to be with Evelina, and that their marriage had become a burden to him. Kalinda was devastated. The man she had trusted and loved for years had betrayed her in the most profound way possible. The sister she had always been close to had not only taken her husband, but had also taken away the life Kalinda had known. The pain, anger, and humiliation were unbearable. She felt utterly lost, unsure of how to move forward from such a betrayal. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. Kalinda was in a state of emotional turmoil, unable to comprehend the enormity of the situation. She spent hours pacing the house, replaying the events in her mind, trying to find some way to fix what had been broken. But as the night grew darker, her thoughts became more desperate and erratic. The realization that her life had been irreparably changed pushed her to the brink. By mid-2018, Evelina and Ryan began discussing the possibility of killing Kalinda. Their conversations were initially vague, filled with hypothetical scenarios and what-ifs. But as the pressure of keeping their affair secret mounted, these discussions became more concrete. Evelina, with her cunning and manipulative nature, was the mastermind behind the plan. She knew Ryan was too weak to act on his own, so she convinced him that killing Kalinda was the only solution. Evelina made sure to reassure him that it would be easy, that they could make it look like a robbery gone wrong. She emphasized that this would be their only chance to be together without the threat of exposure. They decided that Ryan would be the one to carry out the murder. Evelina would establish an alibi for herself by attending a social event that evening, ensuring that there would be no suspicion on her part. They chose August 10th, 2018, as the date for the murder, an evening when Kalinda would be home alone, and Evelina's alibi would be solid. On the evening of August 10th, 2018, Ryan arrived home earlier than usual. Kalinda, unaware of what was about to happen, was preparing dinner in their kitchen. Ryan, acting as if everything was normal, helped her set the table. They exchanged casual conversation, but his mind was racing with the gruesome task ahead. After dinner, Ryan waited until Kalinda was alone in the living room. He had hidden a knife in the kitchen, the one he planned to use to make it look like a crime of passion, a sudden burst of rage. As Kalinda sat on the couch, unsuspecting, Ryan approached her from behind. In a swift and brutal motion, Ryan attacked Kalinda. She didn't have time to react or defend herself. The first stab was deep, and she screamed in pain and terror. Ryan continued, driven by fear and desperation, until Kalinda lay motionless on the floor. The living room, once a place of warmth and comfort, was now a scene of horror. Ryan quickly disposed of the knife, wiping it clean and placing it back in the kitchen, attempting to cover up any evidence of premeditation. He then staged the scene to look like a botched robbery, overturning furniture and scattering items around the house. When he was satisfied with the setup, Ryan left the house, his clothes stained with his wife's blood, and went to meet Evelina, who was waiting for him at a predetermined location. As they embraced, the reality of what they had done began to sink in. There was no turning back now. They believed they had committed the perfect crime, one that would free them from their burdens and allow them to be together without fear. That same night, Kalinda was discovered by the housekeeper. The police were called to the scene, and an investigation was immediately launched. It wasn't long before suspicions fell on Evelina and Ryan, given the circumstances surrounding the events of that day. Both Evelina and Ryan were swiftly arrested and charged with Kalinda's murder. The evidence against them was damning, and their behavior in the aftermath of Kalinda's death only served to reinforce the investigators' belief in their guilt. The affair, once a closely guarded secret, was now exposed to the world, and the consequences were severe. From the outset, the Portland Police Department suspected foul play, given the circumstances of Kalinda's death and the complicated relationships involved. As the investigation unfolded, it became increasingly clear that Evelina and Ryan were not only involved, but were the masterminds behind the murder. Evelina, known for her intelligence and cunning, had meticulously planned the crime. She understood the risks involved and believed she could manipulate the situation to her advantage. Her ability to conceal the affair and her role in the murder was a testament to her calculating nature. Ryan, though initially hesitant, was ultimately swayed by Evelina's influence and the promise of a future together. He agreed to go along with the plan, convinced that their involvement would never be discovered. As the investigation progressed, several key pieces of evidence were uncovered that pointed directly to Evelina and Ryan's guilt. The first and most damning piece of evidence was the discovery of Evelina's fingerprint on the handle of the knife used to kill Kalinda. The knife, which was found at the crime scene, had been wiped clean of other prints, but a single partial print remained. This print was later matched to Evelina, placing her at the scene of the crime and directly linking her to the murder weapon. The second significant piece of evidence came from surveillance footage obtained from a security camera near Kalinda's home. The footage showed a vehicle matching the description of Evelina's car driving past the house on the night of the murder. The timestamp on the footage placed the car near the scene just minutes before the estimated time of death. Investigators cross-referenced the footage with traffic cameras in the area, further confirming that Evelina's car had been in the vicinity of Kalinda's home at a suspicious time. In addition to the fingerprint and surveillance footage, another crucial piece of evidence was found during the search of Ryan's belongings. When police searched his personal effects, they discovered Kalinda's wristwatch in his possession. The watch, a gift from Kalinda's parents, was distinctive and easily recognizable. Ryan was unable to provide a plausible explanation for how he came to have the watch, and his attempts to dismiss it as a mistake only aroused further suspicion. As the evidence mounted, investigators began to piece together the timeline of events leading up to Kalinda's murder. Interviews with friends, family members, and colleagues revealed that Evelina had grown increasingly resentful of Kalinda in the months leading up to the crime. The affair between Evelina and Ryan had been a poorly kept secret, with several acquaintances reporting seeing the pair together in compromising situations. These reports, coupled with the physical evidence, painted a clear picture of a premeditated murder driven by jealousy and greed. During interrogations, both Evelina and Ryan initially denied any involvement in the crime. Evelina, in particular, was defiant and maintained her innocence, insisting that the evidence had been fabricated or misinterpreted. Ryan, on the other hand, was more nervous and inconsistent in his responses. His inability to maintain a coherent story, coupled with the discovery of Kalinda's watch in his possession, led investigators to believe that he was hiding something. Under pressure, Ryan eventually broke down and confessed to his role in the murder. He admitted that Evelina had been the mastermind behind the plot, and that he had been coerced into participating. He described how Evelina had convinced him that their only chance at happiness was to eliminate Kalinda and start a new life together. Ryan's confession was a turning point in the investigation, providing the final piece of the puzzle that investigators needed to charge both Evelina and Ryan with first-degree murder. With the confession in hand and the overwhelming evidence against them, prosecutors prepared to take the case to trial. The public was shocked by the details of the crime, particularly the cold and calculated manner in which Evelina and Ryan had carried out their plan. The case attracted widespread media attention, with many commentators highlighting the betrayal and greed that had driven the two lovers to murder. As the investigation concluded, it became clear that Evelina and Ryan had underestimated the complexity of the crime they had committed. Despite their efforts to cover their tracks, the evidence against them was irrefutable. The murder of Kalinda Baker was not only a tragedy, but a stark reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and obsession. The trial of Evelina and Ryan for the murder of Kalinda Baker was one of the most closely watched cases in Portland's recent history. The courtroom was packed with media, family members, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the final chapter of a tragic and sensational story. The prosecution presented a compelling case, built on a solid foundation of physical evidence, witness testimonies, and Ryan's confession. The defense, despite their best efforts, struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence against their clients. After several weeks of testimony and legal arguments, the jury deliberated for only a short time before reaching a unanimous verdict. Evelina and Ryan were found guilty of first-degree murder. The announcement of the verdict was met with a mix of relief and sadness from Kalinda's family, who had endured months of uncertainty and grief. Evelina, who had maintained her composure throughout the trial, finally showed signs of distress as the reality of her situation began to sink in. She had always believed that she could outsmart the system, but now, faced with a lifetime behind bars, she was confronted with the harsh consequences of her actions. During the sentencing phase, the judge addressed both defendants directly, condemning their actions as cold-blooded and premeditated. Evelina was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a punishment that reflected the severity of her crime and her central role in orchestrating the murder. Ryan, whose involvement was seen as less calculated and more influenced by Evelina's manipulations, received a 20-year prison sentence. The judge acknowledged that Ryan had been coerced to some extent, but emphasized that his decision to participate in the murder made him fully culpable. Evelina's reaction to the sentence was one of disbelief and devastation. Throughout her life, she had been used to getting what she wanted, often through manipulation and deceit. She had never imagined that she would be held accountable for her actions, especially not to this extent. The reality of spending the rest of her life in a prison cell, without any hope of release, was a crushing blow to her sense of control and superiority. Evelina's psychological state deteriorated rapidly as she struggled to come to terms with her new reality. Ryan, though equally devastated by his sentence, approached his fate with a greater sense of resignation. He had known, deep down, that he was guilty and that there would be consequences for his involvement in Kalinda's murder. The trial had forced him to confront the enormity of what he had done, and the 20-year sentence, while severe, felt like a fitting punishment for his role in the crime. Unlike Evelina, Ryan did not harbor illusions of being above the law. Following the sentencing, Evelina and Ryan were transferred to separate correctional facilities, where they would begin serving their sentences. Evelina was sent to a maximum security prison for women, where she would spend her days in relative isolation, surrounded by other inmates serving long sentences for serious crimes. The transition from a life of freedom and privilege to one of confinement and restriction was jarring for Evelina, who struggled to adjust to the harsh realities of prison life. She found herself isolated not only physically, but emotionally, as the other inmates viewed her with suspicion and disdain. Ryan, meanwhile, was sent to a medium-security prison, where he faced a different set of challenges. Although his sentence was shorter than Evelina's, 20 years still represented a significant portion of his life, and he knew that his time in prison would be difficult. Ryan's reputation as a once successful businessman meant little behind bars, and he quickly realized that survival in prison required a different set of skills.